So what we're going to do now is take a look at updating the following for a user and provide that functionality. But if we think about what kind of work this method is going to need to do, then it's going to need to update our user interface in a few different places. And where are we displaying following information at the moment? Well, if we scroll down and take a look at Tom's image inside the activity, well, if we were as Bob to decide that we want to unfollow Tom, then this orange circle is going to need to be removed and his followers information is going to need to go down. Also, in the activity sidebar, we need to adjust this so that we no longer show following inside here as well. And if we look at Tom's profile, then also we need to update the statistics in here and also update the status of whether we're following or not following Tom inside the header as well. So there's a number of different places where our update following is going to need to do a bit of work. And let's take a look at what we need to do. So we'll head back to VS Code, and what we'll do is we'll start off in the agent.ts. And inside here, we'll just add a new method to update the following. So we'll say update following, and we'll pass in a username as the string, as a type of string, and we'll say requests.post, and then we'll use backticks /follow $, and then pass in the username, and we'll just pass up an empty object for this request. So what we need to do is update the attendee objects that we currently have inside our registry when we change a following status. So what we'll do is we'll go across to our activity store first of all. And inside here, we're going to create a kind of helper method to update the attendee following status. So what we'll do is we'll specify update attendee following, and we'll pass in the username of the attendee that we want to adjust here. And what we're going to need to do is loop over what's inside our activity registry. So what we'll do is we'll say list.activity registry, and then we'll use for each. And for each activity, we're going to update here. And then we need to go and get our activity attendees, and we're going to loop over these, each one of the attendees, inside the activity registry. And we'll specify attendee. And what we want to do, and let's just make sure we've got the correct type information here, and we do, this is a type of profile. And what we'll do is we'll say if attendee.username is equal to the username that we're passing in here. This is the username that we're about to follow. And what we want to do is check the attendee following status first of all. And if we are following this user, then we're about to unfollow this user. So what we want to do is say attendee.followersCount and -- to decrement that by 1. Otherwise, we'll add the colon and say attendee.followersCount and say ++ to increment it by 1. And then what we'll do is we'll update the following flag. So we'll say attendee following is equal to the opposite of attendee.following. And this is going to be our helper method to update the attendees inside each activity that we have inside our registry, because they're the activities that are displayed in the user interface. And then what we can do is we can go across to our profile store. So we'll open up the profile store, and what we'll do inside here is we'll create a method to update the following inside here. So what we'll do is we'll say update following, and we'll make this an async method because we'll use this one to call our agent method in the API. And we'll say username as one parameter, and we're going to add a helper parameter here as well, and we're going to call it following. And this is going to be a type of Boolean. Now, the idea of this second property, the following property, we're going to use this as what we're about to set the following status to. So it's not the current status of their following, it's what we're going to do when we click on this button. And I've missed off the arrow here. But this is effectively going to save us from creating two different methods to either follow a user or unfollow a user. And we'll get the status of what we're about to do inside this parameter. So this is where a following follower system becomes conceptually tricky to follow, but this parameter here is what we're about to change the status to. So just bear that in mind. And what we'll do is we'll update our loading flag and set this to true. And then we'll add a try catch block. And we'll take in an error. And we'll say console.log and error. And then we'll add a running action and we'll just pass this .loading equals false. And inside the try block, what we want to do is we want to say await agent.profiles.update following and then pass in the username. And at this point, we can go ahead and update our attendees. So what we can do is say store.activityStore and we'll say update attendee following, and then we just need to pass in the username. And then what we want to do is create a running action as we're going to update the observables inside our profile store. So we'll use the run in action function. And what we want to do is update the profile that we have stored inside this observable. Now this could be for the current user or it could be for another user. And we'll need to check this because this will change whether or not we're updating the followers count or the following count if we're looking at this particular user's profile. So we'll only concentrate on if we're looking at another user's profile for the time being. And just make sure we get that functionality working. So we'll scroll back down and what we'll do is we'll check to see if this .profile, and we'll add double ampersand just so that we make sure that we have a profile, because we're going to be able to update a following regardless of whether or not a profile has been selected. Our follow button is going to be attached to our profile card, so it can be clicked from anywhere. And we may or may not have a profile that we need to update at this point. But what we also want to do is check that the username in this profile is not equal to the store.userstore.user.username. And if that's the case, then we're going to check the following property that we're passing in here. This is what we are about to do. And we'll use ternary and say this.profile.followersCount, and we'll increment this because this following property is what we're about to change it to. So we want to increase the followers count. And if not, then we'll say this.profile.followersCount to decrement it. And regardless, we're going to say this.profile.following is equal to the opposite of this.profile.following. And what we also want to do is update the followings in the list that we're going to store in this profile. Now we're jumping ahead of ourselves here because we don't have a way to retrieve the followings inside here, but we will do. And what we'll do, we'll scroll back up and we're going to add a property called followings. And we're going to set this to a type of profile array and just give it an initial value of an empty array. And then what we'll do, we'll scroll back down again and back down to our update following method, and we'll also take the opportunity to update the followings inside there because this is as well going to be a list of profiles that we're going to display, and when a following changes we want to also update this. So what we'll do is we'll say this.followings.for each, and each of these is going to be a profile, and we're going to say if profile.username is equal to the username, then we're going to say profile.following and we'll add a ternary, and this is not based on the property that we're passing in here. This is based on their existing status and we're changing it to the opposite of whatever this is right now. So what we'll do is we'll say profile.followersCount and otherwise it will be profile.followersCount++ to increment. And then what we'll do is we'll just set profile.following to the opposite of profile.following. So slightly confusing, I appreciate this. And what makes this confusing is this property here. This one is what we're about to change it to. And we're going to pass that in from the function that we create. So we haven't tied everything together yet, but bear in mind that this property is what are we going to set the following to, and the profile.following here is what the following status currently is. So there's a slight difference in what we're using here. And what we also want to do, of course, and this is very easy to forget, is to turn off the loading flag once we've finished all of our business in the running action. And this also needs to go inside the running action. And we're just going to set this.loading equals false. Easy to forget, but also a very easy fix if you do forget. So hopefully what we're doing here will become much clearer about the usage of this. And it's hard to visualize just now, but when we do what we're going to do next, we're going to create a component out of our follow button and put it in various locations on a profile card and on the profile itself. And what we're going to need to do is get the following status for whatever profile it is we're clicking on for that button. So hopefully this usage, even if it doesn't seem clear at the moment, will become clear in the next lesson.